All right. Well, good morning, and with that wake-up call, I'm sure everybody is having a good morning. Thanks for joining us at AWS reinvent. I'm Steve Schmidt. I'm here to chat with you a little bit about security and AWS. Now, an interesting way to look at security is to sort of dissect the problem that we're trying to address. And for those of you who have dealt with Amazon in the past directly, you'll learn that we are an extremely rigorous, is the polite term, company when it comes to dissecting our errors. We take a great deal of effort in when something doesn't go well, understanding exactly what happened and why. And part of that process is a formal evaluation of what occurred and a recording of learnings from that called a cause of error. And as part of the cause of error process, we do an analysis of exactly what happened and what were the events that took place and the timelines, the actions people took, and the failures and successes and what would have mitigated things, et cetera. But at the bottom of that large document, there is a section called the 5 whys. And 5 whys are all about asking the question why 5 times recursively. Because we've found that traditionally people, when they ask why something occurred, what went wrong, they'll stop the first time they get an answer, and they think that's the root cause. And I think that enterprise security is not where it needs to be. And so we asked the question, why, 5 times to help us dig into that. So why is security such a hot topic for most companies out there? Because it's hard to do. It is something that's difficult to do. It takes a lot of precision, it takes a lot of planning. There's an enormous amount of judgment that's applied. In fact, one of the most interesting conversations you have with security professionals are the ones around human judgment. So many people think that the security profession is one of black and white, and it's not. It really isn't. There is no such thing as secure. You're never perfectly secure. Well, okay, I can secure your data perfectly. The problem is there may be a usability impact when I put your hard disk in a block of concrete and throw it in the bottom of the ocean. So in reality, it's all about making good judgments along the way. And as part of the judgment process, we have to do an enormous amount of planning. And planning is something that takes a tremendous amount of time because we effectively get one shot at it. When you look at when we launch a new service in AWS, we need to get the application security process for that right the first time before it goes out the door. And there is an enormous amount of planning involved in that. And in your lives, there's probably also an enormous amount of planning. And that planning sometimes takes a really long time. Hello. Planning takes a really long time because there's so many things that you have to do. There are so many processes that have to be gone through. And it's a situation where as you learn more about security over time, in fact, the processes tend to accrete. You get more and more and more of them. Oh, we made that mistake in the past, so let's add another process in to prevent the mistake. Well, pretty soon you end up with process molasses, and your security isn't moving as rapidly as your business needs to. Well, why are there so many processes? Because it's really, unfortunately, easy to make a mistake in our business. Remember, in most circumstances, we have a zero-tolerance business for security errors. And it's also difficult to fix mistakes in many circumstances in a traditional business. When you think about a traditional business, your ability to go back and change something is often very limited. It's limited by the flexibility of the fabric you're operating on. It's limited by the frequency of your deployments. It's limited a lot by the visibility that you have into your infrastructure and the controllability of that infrastructure. What are the knobs and levers that you've got at your disposal to make adjustments to your secured posture? So why are those mistakes so hard to correct? Like I said, number one reason, lack of visibility. I say this all the time. You cannot secure that which you don't know about. It is impossible to design an appropriate security regime for something where you have no idea what the data is, where it's located, who put it there, what it's there for, what it's connected to, what it should be talking to, and what it shouldn't. And so we build these incredible piles of processes and procedures to try and avoid problems, as opposed to being able to address things very rapidly. And that's traditionally because there's a very low degree of automation in the security world. When you look at the way that people interact with their systems out there, they often have to do it using hands-on keyboards, people at consoles, or clicking in web pages, or, if you're really hardcore, command line interfaces. Two problems with that. Number one, it's slow. Reacting to a problem is slow. How often have you had to go find the network guy in the middle of the night to go fix a firewall rule? The second reason that I really don't like those is humans in contact with information make mistakes. People make errors. They type the wrong thing on command lines. They click the wrong button in a GUI. And so one of the things that we focus a lot on is making security more agile. When you look at the way security operates in AWS, we have to operate as a security team at the speed of our business. Last year, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new features and services. This year, of course, more than we had last year. And every one of them has to be reviewed by the application security team. Every one of them has to pass penetration testing more than once. By the way, for those of you who are interested, penetration testing is something that we do both on a periodic basis and with every service launch that we do. We do penetration testing from 3 different viewpoints. The first is we have an internal pen test team who has a most fantastic job in the company, go break things. And then we use external penetration testing partners who are good at particular types of pen testing for both black box and white box testing. But we need to move at the speed of our business, and we need to keep safe while we move at the speed of our business. So one of the things that we're really happy about the announcements that are occurring this week are about new tools that help you move quickly and stay safe at the same time. If you were in Andy's keynote today, you heard us talk about Amazon Inspector, AWS WAF, and Config Rules. These 3 together, if you'll notice, represent an entry into a category of controls focused principally on your ability to see what's going on in your infrastructure and do something about it. Personally, I hate security theater tools that say, it's bad, and give you an enormous list of problems and then say, have a nice day, while you're left to figure out how to go fix the stuff yourself. So one of the design goals that we have with each one of these is give you the ability to fix the problem as soon as we surface the problem for you. And realistically speaking, who amongst us has built anything that's been perfect the first time? If you raise your hand, I'll question your sanity and then I'll hire you. But in reality, we have to test our infrastructures extremely carefully. So our application security team, their job is to make sure that when we build something inside AWS, we build it consistent with the expectations of our customers. That means that we build it in such a manner that your data is appropriately protected, that we operate in a way that we ensure that when you give us instructions about who can access your information, where they can access it from, what time of day, whether they're using MFA, those sorts of things, that we enforce those, that we ensure that we never cross the streams. One customer's data is always returned only to that customer or those who they instruct it to go to. And all of that takes a lot of both human effort and institutional knowledge. And those humans are incredibly valuable resources. They're insanely hard to find good ones. They're really, really tough to recruit and retain. And the knowledge that they have, that institutional knowledge about how to build good, secure systems, is something that we treasure. So I talk quite a bit to our customers about how they do security, just to compare notes and see if there are things we can learn from them and help them learn from us. And universally, the people that we've talked to have said, look, you guys do this job really, really well. I want you to do it for me. And I'm like, well, we don't have enough humans as it is. How can I possibly do it for you too? Well, of course, the answer is the same thing we do with everything else in AWS. Automate it. The best thing about automation, of course, is it does two things. It gives you the same result every time, so you've got repeatability, which auditors love, and it means you free up those incredibly useful, incredibly expensive, incredibly valuable humans to make the judgment calls, as opposed to doing the heavy lifting that has to take place. So Inspector, how does it work? What is it all about? Inspector is a service that's composed of a series of components. There's a configuration scanning engine. This is an agent that's installed on your instance, and it collects a lot of information off of the instance. It then streams that data up to AWS, where we collect it, analyze it, and then give you a report of what we find. The part of the process that's kind of interesting there is Amazon Inspector is designed to be used by our customers the same way that we do application security in-house. This is not something you do quarterly. This is something you can and should do every time you build a system. So for example, if you're using something like code deploy, as part of that pipeline process, you should be doing an application security review at the end of it to make sure that what you're deploying is actually consistent with your expectations. So build it into your automation. The great news is, of course, that Inspector is automatable via an API. The other piece of it that's really important is that you get a record of what the status of that instance assessment was at the end of your output. So if you're in one of those industries that has a very highly regulated component, where you have to prove to an auditor that you've done the analysis that's necessary to maintain your certification and your accreditation, you can use that Inspector output as part of the process of the proof that you need. The built-in content library that's part of Inspector represents an amalgamation of our institutional knowledge about how to run successfully on AWS. I'll talk in a moment about what those pieces are. But the important thing there is this is not a static thing either. As we get better, as we learn more from our customers, we cycle that back into Inspector so that each time you run Inspector, you are getting the most up-to-date information about how to build securely and protect your systems. So this is not something where you have to think to remember to look at a web page to learn about what the newest way to do da-da-da-da-da is. It's built into the system. So what are these rules that we're applying to the analysis portion itself? They're on the screen, but let's dig into them in a little bit here. CVEs, this is really straightforward. Do you have any packages installed on your instances that have critical vulnerabilities? Very straightforward. The problem is, when you go talk to customers, how many of them do this kind of scanning on a regular basis? Many fewer than should. Additionally, we start going a little bit further down the stack. Network security best practices. Are you using secure protocols? Are you using good configurations for things like Samba and NMB? As Inspector evolves, and you'll see changes in the rule sets in the very near future, we'll add support for things like determining TLS versions and cipher suite selections. You move into authentication best practices. Are you permitting SSH logins for root? Not a terribly good idea, especially if you're doing things like permitting SSH logins with passwords, as opposed to using certs or keys. So we help you avoid things that are bad ideas in general and are easy to fix. We also do the more mundane stuff that's necessary for a lot of things like password aging, complexity rule enforcement, those sorts of things. The operating system best practices, this is where you get into the more esoteric stuff that's kind of fun. Are you configured so that you're using address randomization on Linux, as an example, or DEP? Do you have file system areas that are writable that shouldn't be? Are you building your system in a way that's consistent with the hardening practices that most people see as appropriate? Do you have stack cookies enabled, for example? PCI, this is a big one for many, many customers. It's an absolute deal breaker if they don't get PCI readiness as part of their business. PCI readiness, of course, has a series of steps in it. We help make that easier by identifying those portions of your operation which either meet or don't meet the PCI requirements set. So PCI requirement number 1, for example, is your network configuration. Are you using a network in a way that's consistent with the PCI rule set that we can tell from your infrastructure? You have username and password configuration set up appropriately on your machines. That's number 2. Number 4, are you using appropriate cryptography? Are you encrypting the data in transit and at rest? Number 6, which is the application security and development practice portion, we also assess components of that. Number 7, need to know enforcement. And number 8, identity authentication. So what do all these things get you at the end of the day? Number 1, increased agility. Remember we talked about the whole process and procedure thing at the beginning of this? When you think about your traditional application security process, when you completed your development test, you then had to hand off to an AppSec team because you were doing an AppSec review, right? And that meant you stopped development and waited while somebody did a review, or you kept developing and what they were reviewing wasn't what you're actually shipping. And so one of the things that's most liberating here for a lot of people is the fact that all of a sudden application security processes are built into your dev cycle. It's something that just happens every time you create a new build if you choose to do so. The net result is an improved security posture, hands down. Do we catch errors that are silly, things that are on this list, when our teams build new services inside? Yep, absolutely. And that's why we had to automate this for our own business. And as a result, I think a lot of customers will find a much better security posture for themselves. Streamlined compliance. Auditors love documentation. They like pretty printouts that are thick, and they can look at them and weigh them and think how wonderful they are. And this gives you the proof that you need to show your auditors that you're doing the things that are appropriate and responsible. Okay, cool. Let's talk about what actually happens here. Install the inspector agent. On launch today, it's available for Linux on EC2. Obviously, we've heard lots and lots from lots of customers that they would love to see a Windows agent as well. That's not available on launch, but it's something we are certainly focused on. You run the agent for a period of time. The time is a period that you select. There's a pull-down menu that gives you options anywhere from a few minutes up to 24 hours. At the end of that assessment, we do an analysis of the findings, and we present them to you. We present the findings in priority order. So this is the actual console, which is launching right now. So if you want to go play with it, you can. The findings are presented based on our severity assessment, based on your infrastructure and the grading associated with the individual issue that are associated there. So the findings, as you note, show which rule package it's applied to and the instance and the particulars of exactly what's wrong. Great. Didn't you say something about saying everything's broken and not telling you how to fix it? Okay. Dig into it a little bit further here. Detailed remediation instructions. Look at the bottom line there. It's very straightforward to do this kind of work. It gives people really straightforward instructions. Here's what to go do to fix the problem so you're not vulnerable to it. For everything where we could do this in an automated fashion, we have. There are some things that are dependent on your environment that we won't be able to give you a recommendation on how to fix, but we'll say, please consider doing da-da-da-da-da. But the intent here is that for every time we source a problem, we give you a solution as well. So that's Inspector. Let's talk about AWS WAF. Everybody should know what a WAF is. It's a web application firewall. What does a web application firewall do, of course, is web filtering. At launch, the AWS WAF is available in front of Amazon CloudFront. The point here is that we give you a way to put protection in front of CloudFront that was not previously available. It gives you centralized rule management, so no matter which one of our CloudFront POPs you're using around the world, which distribution of yours you're using on any of those POPs, you can enforce the same rules or appropriately different rules based on your geolocation. Centralized rule management is great, but you need real-time visibility. Real-time visibility means that you get to see what's going on with your infrastructure, what the requests are that you're receiving, and what the result of that request is in as close to near real time as we can. There's, of course, a lag between when the event occurs and when we can get a log off the machine and it get back presented to you, but we endeavor to make that lag as little as possible. Given this is AWS, everything is automated with an API. Why is that important? Two things. Number one, so you can drive it with your own tools if you want. Number two, if you're using one of our partners who are integrated with the AWS WAF, they will work directly. And I'll talk in a moment about who those are and what they're doing. So what does this get you? Increased protection against web attacks. Okay, this is really straightforward. If you think about the kind of problems that you see in most web environments, there is a huge pile of silly things that you have to protect against in all circumstances. We all know about SQL injection attacks and cross-site scripting and request forgery and those sorts of things. Nobody should be vulnerable to those, but unfortunately many applications are. So it just makes sense to put that kind of rule set in front of your application and have it there 24/7. Ease of deployment and maintenance, guess what? You don't have to put a box in place, you don't have to configure a separate VM, you don't have to worry about cabling, you don't have to worry about what happens when the power supply burns out here. It just works. We handle all that heavy lifting for you. More importantly, as there are issues that pop up and vulnerabilities with the software that underpins the service, it's our problem to fix. You don't have to. Again, security embedded in the dev process. Wait, what? He's just talking about a WAF. Yes. As you build new services and roll them out and put them in CloudFront distributions, you can build rule set changes into your dev process. It's kind of cool. So let's talk about WAF in action. Got this little control plane that sits in the middle of everything, and you talk to the control plane either via management console or via APIs. Some people like command lines, some people like GUIs. We'll help them both out. You've got a set of CloudFront distributions where your data sits and is served up to your customers. You define rules about who can do what with your data from where in the world and in what fashion. Those are applied through the service to every one of the CloudFront distributions worldwide. Note, I didn't have to log into a bunch of different places. I didn't have to say, please deploy it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 places, etc. It just works for you. Our customers love our partners. We love our partners. Our partners do things for them they can't do themselves. And in many cases, that's give you the ability to control your on-premises infrastructure well. So if you look at the folks who are on the screen right now, they all give you the ability to drive your existing WAFs from them and the AWS WAF at the same time using the same console. So you don't have to think about, well, I'm using an alert logic box here, so I got to control my alert logic stuff, and then I got to switch to a different screen to control my AWS infrastructure. Nope. One control plane, one view, go do it. The fun thing is they, of course, had added value that they all bring to the occasion, whether it's threat intelligence or traffic modeling or things like that. So you can use the benefits that you have from your subscription with those individual partners to drive AWS WAF. Maybe change the rule set based on things that you learn by looking across your traffic. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about config rules. This is one that to many people sounds really, really mundane, but when you dig into it, it's insanely powerful. Who wouldn't love the ability to have an enforcement engine check a stream of events in as close to real time as we can humanly make it, and then potentially take an action as a result? So one of the sort of the holy grail questions we got from a lot of customers a while ago was, I'm really worried about this firewall set of rules because it's the way I restrict traffic going to and from a particular customer, and I don't want it to change. Well, with config rules, anytime a change occurs, a config event is emitted. Config rules can watch that config event. If you've established a rule that says, when this change occurs, do something, you can then define a Lambda function which says, change it back. You can do the same thing for situations where tags, as Andy mentioned on stage, have been applied or not applied to your EC2 instances. You can take actions that are consistent with your particular requirements. So you may want to, if something occurs, network restrict an instance. So you don't want to kill it because you don't know what customer data is on there. Maybe you need to do some forensics, but you don't want it to be able to talk to anyone. So you can put a network box around it and prevent that from occurring. You get a dashboard that goes along with this, of course, and reports to help you understand exactly what's going on in your infrastructure. The remediation portion, the customizable remediation portion, I think is the most powerful piece of config rules. If something occurs, take an action. The number of actions that you can conceive are limitless. And it's really, really kind of amazing what some customers have come up with. A little fun one, by the way, there's a talk later on. If you're interested in incident response, by the way, I should have written down the time, and I apologize. But look for an incident response talk by Donald Bailey, who's a principal engineer on our team. And one of the things he talks about is using Lambda to recover deleted objects in S3. And one of the fun bits about that is the time lag between when a config rule fired and when the Lambda function invoked was so quick, he couldn't demo the deletion successfully. He couldn't go list the bucket. So literally in his demo, he had to put a sleep in after he issued the delete so that he could go list the bucket to show the object was gone to have the function fire to restore it from versioning. So when you think about the kinds of attacks that people have had to suffer in the past where someone might go in and try and remove something or change rules and then take an action, if you can get that time frame down to as short an interval as possible, that's some tremendous response capabilities available to you. And of course, config rules is API driven. So you can drive it off of our SDKs, you can run it off of our ecosystem partners. And speaking of ecosystem partners, if you are in the federal space, Telos is going to be somebody that you're probably already dealing with. They do a tremendous amount of work on FedRAMP and continuous monitoring. Hey, this is actually continuous monitoring, which is really quite cool, as opposed to many circumstances where that wasn't necessarily the case. Splunk is tightly integrated, of course. They have a tremendous front-end interface, which drives our APIs on the back end. It helps you define events, understand what's going on, and then react to them appropriately. And Evident.io has a very broad suite of security tools that you can apply across your infrastructure, and adding config rules to their existing set just made sense. So what do you get out of config rules? Continuous monitoring for unexpected changes. You can set up rules that are as simple as, if the firewall is changed, page me, or as complex as, if a tag is not present on an EC2 instance that was not launched by this particular person, then make sure there are no EBS volumes associated with it. Kind of random sounding, but the point is that there's an enormous amount of power available in the actions that you can take. You can tailor it to meet your specific business needs. Sharing compliance across your organization is all about ensuring that everyone in your organization has the same power to control their environment. So if you have a bunch of disconnected teams building software like we do at AWS, by giving them a common set of good templates to work from and config rules to work from, it means that we get the same high bar for security with every team. If you give them all the same hammer, they'll probably hit each other with it. But if you give them all the same tools, they tend to do a better job at building systems. Simplified management of configuration changes is all about making sure that when you change something, you change it the way you expect. It gives you the result that you expect. And nothing would be complete, of course, without a view of the interface here. You set up a series of rules. You get trending that shows you what the rules are in terms of compliant versus non-compliant over time, which if you're as metrics-driven as AWS is, this is a wonderful thing. If you see the red increasing and the green decreasing, then it's time to have a few meetings and talk to some folks about what they're doing wrong. Whereas I'd love to see things go the other direction, make the green get up to 100% and the red to fall down to 0. What does this mean in terms of changes in the way we behave, though? When you combine the way all three of these services come together, previously you had a bunch of disconnected steps. Remember in the beginning of the talk, I said one of the biggest problems with security in most organizations is it's handoffs of processes from one team to another. and discontinuous involvement so that one team isn't talking to the other, working with the other rapidly or completely. We believe this helps you be more agile, but at the same time still meet your security goals. By reducing the cycle time, the connection time between one group and one process and another, it means that you end up in a situation where you have a much higher likelihood of meeting your particular business goals, optimizing the security of your environment, and still proving to your auditors and your customers that you're doing the things that you say you're going to do in the most sane way possible. The net result, we make life easier. And making life easier for security is something that is not usually in people's lexicon. But if we can make all of our developers' lives easier by getting security right the first time, it gives them more freedom to contribute successfully to your business, to build new cool software features, and fewer headaches from when the security guys show up saying, "You need to change this." Choosing security does not mean giving up on convenience or introducing complexity. And one of the things that we've been focused on for quite a long time is giving you the ability to create very, very small enclaves around individual sets of data, individual VPCs that might contain one application, as an example. Why do that? Minimization of blast radius. If something goes wrong, ensure that the minimum amount of data is exposed, that you have the maximum amount of control between those applications, and only people who are authorized can see the data. Now, previously, that's been a little bit difficult to do. With incredible ability to control, sometimes comes complexity. And I want to introduce to the stage Angelo Comazetto from Aceto. Aceto is one of our partners that has really demonstrated a tremendous ability to take what were previously very complex security configurations and make them simple. Angelo.
Thanks, Steve. Hello. Aceto is a software-defined WAN automation company, and we build really cool gateways, access points, and switches. But I'm here today to take the wraps off something we've been working on for quite a while for AWS. Now, AWS encourages you and allows you quite easily to make compartmentalized VPC designs. You want lots of VPCs, right? You want R&D to have their own VPC, and you want marketing to have their own VPC. Much like a ship, if you have only one hull, what happens is there's a lot of water that's constantly trying to get inside. As well, no matter how well you build your hull, occasionally something random will happen. Some pirates will come along and start shooting rockets at you. If you only have one hull, guess what happens if you take some damage? You sink. So the trade-off to that is you build a very cool, secure design for your ship, very elegant. You put lots of compartments. You have lots of hatches, and you have guards standing by them. And that way, if you get attacked, the interior of the compartment that is breached becomes the new hull of your ship, and you stay afloat. And much like that, AWS gives you lots of very powerful tools to build and deploy secure architecture. The problem that's introduced is, as you deploy more and more secure architectures, the complexity tends to go up. Such as, now you have all of these different VPCs. You might have dozens or hundreds of VPCs. I know there are AWS customers that have thousands of VPCs. But connecting that all together, even if you're very good at what you do, is just time. You have to sit down and you have to program all of that together. And then you have to then deal with requests for new VPCs, and you have to go back and touch all the stuff you did before to try to keep things plumbed together. So we thought one of the best things that we could do is kind of how Amazon approaches problems. Let's automate that. Now, to automate this, you have to understand how Aceto works. And we're going to start by introducing our Cloud Console. Now, our Cloud Console is, we kind of compare it to the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. We just leave out that whole burn everything, destroy all angle that he had. The idea is that if you can see everything that's going on in your VPCs and your networks, you can then make intelligent automation decisions on taking away some of the tasks that you have to do on an ongoing basis. And thus, we give you access to architectures that might previously have been out of your reach, just on sheer time and complexity. And the really cool thing is the only thing you need to do is log into an Aceto Cloud Console and connect it to AWS. So we'll talk about how we do that. In a few minutes, we'll get a little bit more into the security details of how we built it. But the first step is you log into a cloud console that we provisioned for you, and you then use a very secure way using cross-account IAM rules to just connect AWS into your cloud console. Now, I want to say that at no time do we infect your AWS. I do know what it's like to play with vendor products, and they say, just let us into your AWS and we'll do some cool stuff for you. And then you decide it wasn't for you, and you then have to go manually cut out all of the things they did. We don't do that. We do it in a very non-invasive and a very cool way, using AWS tools that you use every single day. And the idea here is that once you've connected to the Osito Cloud Console and connected that into your AWS architecture, you then instantly get a list of all of your VPCs in all of your regions worldwide. Now, we haven't actually done anything. All we've done is done a scan, and we've just populated a GUI with some visuals of things that you might get from clicking through the AWS GUI. But where it gets interesting is when you sit there and you go, yes, this VPC, the one from marketing, and the one from finance, and the one from security, just on a sheer routing and connectivity basis, need to be able to see each other. So what we do is we enable a nice full mesh deployment of VPN connectivity between them, which means you don't have to manually sit down and build individual VPN tunnels. And in fact, you can do all of this without knowing a single thing about VPNs or about routing. And when you're ready and everything's connected, we bring you to this screen. And this is the screen where you push deploy, which actually deploys Osito virtual gateways delivered through the Amazon Marketplace. They get deployed into your selected subnets, and you actually go get a coffee. It doesn't matter if you've selected 5 VPCs or 25 VPCs. You pick your VPCs you want to connect, click deploy, and we will automatically find a free subnet. We will deploy an Osito gateway into that. We'll set everything up. It'll boot up the appliance. It'll reboot itself and update to the latest firmware. And when everything is ready to go, the only running change we make to your environment is we simply add a route to your route tables that tells your infrastructure that to reach the connected networks, they should use the Osito VPN appliance. Very non-invasive. All traffic doesn't have to flow through us. All it does is add a super VPN highway on top of your existing VPCs that you've selected. And even more importantly, if for whatever reason you decide that wasn't for you, didn't like it, you push one button and we completely back out. You never know we were there at all. We didn't change a thing. But the really cool thing is when you're finished, if you've ever built VPN tunnels before by hand, you'll love the next part because VPN tunnel people have always wanted some cool maps like this. Right? This shows you all of your VPNs, all of your VPCs worldwide in all regions that you've selected, all connected together with a nice status and an uptime. This is just a sampling of our GUI. You'd see the whole thing when you log in. We just focused on the cool parts for you today. So you can sit down and you suddenly have access to as many compartmentalized VPC architectures as you had before, but now you can do it in literally 5, maybe 10 minutes. It doesn't take you weeks or months. And what's most interesting, if tomorrow you have a brand new VPC you want to connect, you do not have to go and run through all of the different VPN route tables and architectures you had before. You just go back to the screen and select the new VPC and sit back, and it'll replumb everything in together for you. Our goal was to enable more companies to have access to these types of secure architectures. We love AWS. They give you some very powerful tools. This just makes them much more available to a lot more people who want to use those types of architectures. And what's even more interesting is how we did it. Now, not only does Osito themselves, or Osito ourselves offers you things in AWS, but we run everything in AWS. The cloud console we give you runs in AWS. And we do everything using as many Amazon tools as we can today, with as much plans as we have to do some more things tomorrow. The first thing is it's all API-based, so you get in CloudTrail a full log of everything we touch, every object, what time, what was changed. It allows you to use your own automation tools if you've run scripts and things that invoke CloudTrail. If you need to undo things or automate things further yourself, we can support that. And we do it very securely by the only thing that we do when you join us to your account is we run the STS assume role command. That's all we do. You have to go make an IAM role. We need some CloudTrail and some EC2 permissions. You then take the role and you paste it back into the Osito GUI and just allow us into your architecture. But at that point, everything that we do on our side is also secure. Each customer gets their own dedicated cloud console, nothing shared. You get your own dedicated sets of credentials. We've seen that before. Us as a vendor, we are assuming a role. So something has to do the assuming. And on our side, we use a separate set of credentials for each customer as well. So those are dedicated on a per customer basis. So not only do we enable you to do secure things, we use the very latest in secure tools as well. Now, I know that at reInvent, you are going to see lots of very cool things. You are going to hear about lots of very cool things. And you might leave here and instantly try to go try some of those things. So the first thing we wanted to do is make sure that you're able to use our stuff without even talking to us if you don't want to. So we're ready for you. Your cloud console has already been built and is awaiting for you. You just have to go to osito.com/AWS. You click a button, it'll send you to the marketplace where you'll subscribe to the terms. You can't launch marketplace instances in that fabulous place, which we love, until you do that. But at that point, there's no salespeople to talk to, no license keys to go purchase, no emails to salespeople, none of that stuff. You log into your console, which we give you. You can customize it to your company if you want, or remain anonymous. And at that point, you're then able to start integrating it into your AWS infrastructure. And even if you don't use us, you can connect it, look at it, scan all your VPCs. It's really fun. We had a customer that came by the other night that said, I used that tool and I found 4 VPCs I totally didn't even know were there. Now that's also a customer who had lots of VPCs, but it's a problem that real companies face. They come by us on the show floor and every customer in here either has lots of VPCs or wish they did, just because it really does a good job at lowering your blast radius if something does go wrong. Great, marketing just detonated. Everybody else is fine. My forward-facing application is fine. It's a really great benefit. And I'll leave you with 2 quick points. Not only do we build really cool stuff for AWS, but also people still go to work at physical offices somewhere. Even if you move everything into the cloud, you need to get to it. And the stuff that we build for gateways, access points, and switches automatically plumb you into that same VPN framework that you saw that does all of your VPC connectivity. So each office can have a full mesh VPN to all of your VPCs and get access to all of the applications that you want, and still, you don't have to know a single thing about VPN tunnels to do that. And we also make a really cool agent that connects your employees to that same VPN framework without them ever even knowing it's there from wherever they are in the world whenever they leave a company location. So we make some cool stuff, but more importantly, we allow you to make use of some very, very cool, secure AWS architectures. Thank you very much.
What booth number?
And if you enter the booth numbers, we're 329.
Booth number 329, down on the expo floor. Thank you, Angelo. Okay, security by design. This is about getting it right the first time. Security by design is a theory that we have that people can operate using a systematic approach to the way they build their infrastructure, analyze their infrastructure, report on their infrastructure, and then deploy their infrastructure. The formalization process of AWS account design has worked really, really well in a lot of very highly regulated industries. We found that for a lot of our financial services customers, for example, when we worked with them directly to establish things like good templates, run books, procedures for configurations, et cetera, they were much, much more successful down the road with their internal audit and compliance process. And security by design is something that I think can benefit everybody because you can use as much or as little of the process as you like, consistent with your individual business goals. You can choose to do things that use CloudFormation templates, for example, to give you known good image sets, or ways to interconnect subnets, or ways to put firewalls in front of VPCs, or analysis platforms, maybe a WAF. And this is something that I think that anybody who walks away from this, I would ask you to take this with you and make a determination for your business. Should I have a standardized set of CloudFormation templates that represent a good place to start for my own internal staff? Means when you hire that next person, they have a much higher likelihood of doing things consistently with your security goals when you point them to a template and say, start here. This is the way I want to see it. We talked a little bit today about how we do things inside AWS. And many of our customers ask us, how do you run security yourself? You know, you move at this crazy lightning pace of development. You must have zillions and zillions and zillions of security engineers. No, there aren't enough security engineers on the planet for us to have a linear number of security engineers with the number of features that we offer. So what we do is we have a very tightly integrated security team that is intended to increase agility. We specifically structure the security function to be fast while staying safe. Most places where you deal with very traditional security teams, the first job of the security professional is to say, stop. My opinion, a security engineer saying no is a failure. They are not doing their job. As security professionals, our job is to find a way to help our customers, our internal customers, do what they want to sanely and reasonably and quickly. So let's go through who our security staff is, what they do. Our operations team, they're the folks who are on the end of their pagers. When something goes bump in the night, they're the ones who get alerted and then have to go take a look, see what's going on, take an action, make a notification, those sorts of things. They're tightly coupled with engineering. Engineering is the team that builds the tools that we consume. They're the people who build everything from our internal scanning platform that looks at every single network device that we have in our infrastructure every few minutes so that we can ensure that the configurations that we've implemented in those devices are actually represented in reality. By the way, the number of bugs in major hardware manufacturers' platforms that we've discovered through that is not small. Application security. These are the people who say this is the way you should build something securely. They go and test it and ensure that it actually performs the way we expect. And they're the ones who brought you Inspector, the people who said, you know what, we want to take our knowledge, put it in a box, and let our customers check that box and go ahead and use it. And then compliance. Wait, what? Compliance is in the same team as security? Absolutely. Absolutely. For the primary reason that I have to prove to every one of you that we're doing what we say we're doing. It's all great for me to stand up here and say, you know, we build things securely. You need to be able to say, yes, somebody else tested what they do and actually proved that they're doing what they say they're doing. Some crazy statistics that are kind of interesting, and I'm sure this is not the first time you've been shocked by statistics in Amazon presentations. We operate almost 2,000 controls in our infrastructure worldwide because of the number of different compliance regimes that we have to deal with every year. From those, of course, we pick the ones that are relevant to individual certifications or accreditations. We apply those. Our auditors test them. They create a report, and that's issued so customers can make a determination about how we're doing. Another piece that's critically important to our success as an organization is making security ownership everybody's job. Every single person in the company is responsible for security. Not the security team, everybody. I have a central security team. They are useful, they are important, they are incredibly beneficial, but the first line of defense are the security engineers who are embedded in our service teams. They are the ones who know those services deeply. More importantly, they are the ones who the software development engineer building the next version of that software set can turn to and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing blah, blah, blah. What do you think? You want that super short cycle time between a question and an answer. You don't want to have to wait for a quarterly sync meeting with a security team. You want them to be embedded in the development process so that we get it right every time. And everybody being an owner also has benefits when you make the executives owners of security. In many organizations, the CISO reports somewhere in the food chain of the CIO or legal or something like that. We chose about 6 years ago to have security report to Andy Jassy directly. That was intentional. It's sending a message to the organization that we are not only a first-class citizen, but in many circumstances, security is the number one thing that you have to do. Because if we get it wrong, our customers don't trust us. If our customers don't trust us, we don't have a business. It's also reflected in the way we operate as a company. And I would ask you to go back and think about your own organizational dynamics this way. Every Friday afternoon, we have a meeting for an hour with Andy Jassy, Charlie Bell, who's a senior vice president in our organization, and all the other senior VPs focused on security. We go through every significant security event, issue, et cetera, that happens during that week, and we ensure that everybody is meeting their security goals for the year. Every single week, a significant portion of the senior leadership team spends time on security. And that's reflected through the rest of the organization. People understand why it's so important as a result. So when people ask for takeaways out of these discussions, these are the ones that I think are the most important for you. We focus a lot on separation of duties. Separation of duties means when you've got two things that have to happen that are critically important to the success of your organization, try and make sure two different people take those actions. In a startup, that may not be possible. But as your organization matures, you should think about it and see whether it's right or not. Different personnel across service lines. That's reflected in AWS with things like the fact that someone who's on the EC2 team may not have permissions to access the S3 team's hardware and software. Keep it just inside your individual silo. Interesting thing, the way we enforce that, by the way, is we have a permission system in our organization that automatically assigns you rights based on teams that you're a member of. And we also require baselining of those rights every 90 days, which means every 90 days the system forces your manager to say, yes, Steve still needs access to that host class. And if you don't get that manager approval, the system automatically revokes your access. So we don't have lingering bits of people having access to everything across the infrastructure. And least privilege. Least privilege is one of your best defenses against somebody harvesting credentials and using them against you. Least privilege means only give people rights to do things that are absolutely required. One of the interesting things that we focus on internally on least privilege is we have a goal for all of our service teams that we enforce this year on reduction of access to customer data. Remember, our business is growing like this. But we set a goal for every service team in our organization to reduce the number of humans who have access to customer data by an enormous amount, almost 80%. We do that because it forces a behavioral change. It forces automation. And automation is great from two perspectives. Computers rarely make mistakes when they do something. Humans make mistakes. Number two is when you don't have a human in contact with data, they can't see the data. They can't do something inappropriate with the data. Keep the people away from the data. Visibility. Automation is great from an operational perspective because people make mistakes and software doesn't generally. Visibility also gives you the metrics you need to understand who is touching what box, from where, when, why, and how. Okay, my request to you, please, ensure that your organizations have appropriate logging turned on in AWS. It is so inexpensive to keep logs in things like Glacier. There is no excuse not to do so. Make sure that you've got CloudTrail turned on. The number of times that we've had to help customers after something has gone wrong, and we ask, do you have CloudTrail turned on? The answer is, I do now. Not good. Please, now, make sure that it's on. Shrinking the protection boundaries. Why did I call Angelo up on stage? We strongly, strongly believe that the way to minimize blast radius is to make what we're calling tiny bubbles of applications. If you have time to come see the Spot 308 presentation, I'll be doing a fireside chat with George Stathakopoulos. George is my peer at Amazon.com, 303. Okay, apparently I can't remember numbers. It's Spot 303. And one of the principal things he's going to be talking about is how Amazon.com, moving on to AWS, got a chance to look at the fact that they had 23,000 internal services. And did they all want them in one big lump, or are they better off putting them into tiny bubbles of containment themselves? And so that's a discussion we'll be having later on this week. Ubiquitous encryption. You will see encryption available in almost all of our services. We believe strongly that the best situation for us is where our employees don't have access to your data. I love the fact that if you use the encryption that we have available, our staff can go in and touch a hard disk in a data center, and guess what? It's only got ciphertext on it. That's a phenomenal place for us to be. Please use the services where they're available. Things like S3 server-side encryption. Guess what, folks? It's free. There's a checkbox on the console to turn it on. Please do so. Security training. Excuse me. There are a number of new security training opportunities today, and this week as well as online. Take advantage of them. Security Fundamentals, of course, is really straightforward. Free online course helps your new security staff or your new development staff get up to speed on how to use AWS. Security Operations. This is about how to run a security business on AWS, what the tools are that you need, the techniques, et cetera. Like I said earlier, there is an incident response talk this week that Don Bailey, Beetle Bailey, is giving. If you've got an opportunity or interested in incident response, take a look at that one. It's really quite cool. Certification education, of course, also includes solutions architect professional certifications. Take advantage of those folks if you can. And the bottom line. Again, takeaway slides. Number 1, define sensible defaults. This gives you a chance to make sure that people do things the right way the first time. Inherit compliance controls. We do an enormous amount of heavy lifting for you. Take advantage of that when you have to prove your compliance to your own auditors or regulators. Use the security features that are there. They are myriad, they are powerful, they are available, and in almost every circumstance, they are free. Take advantage of that, please. Manage templates, not instances. This is tied very closely to the first one. Get it right the first time, repeat. Constantly reduce the role of people. I don't like people touching data in AWS. You shouldn't like people touching data in your infrastructures as well. Find a way to get them away from it. Reduce privilege accounts. If you have people who have root access to your machines, ask the question, why do they really need it? Okay, trivia question. How many global root users are there across the AWS infrastructure? The answer, 0, none. We don't allow it. And that's intentional. And you should think about that the same way. Concentrate on what matters. The more you automate, the more you establish normalcy, the more you use the tools that help you define what is normal and identify deviations from normal, means that you can focus your staff on those things that require human brain power. Staff who's focused on just collecting logs are not going to be paying attention to the content of the logs. They're not going to be analyzing the logs. Conclusions. We all know security is critical. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We're trying to create tools that help make it easier for you to do your job well. Make it easier to do your job right the first time. And we want to take our world-class team and help you build a world-class team as well. Take the knowledge that we've accrued, transfer it to you. Let you learn the bumps that we've had to learn the hard way and not make the same mistakes that we have along the way. Net result, you can move fast and stay safe at the same time. This is something that we've talked a lot about and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on, and I really enjoy it when outsiders give us their viewpoint on what's going on in security. The net result, I think, is that we have an opportunity to significantly improve the security of all of our customers, not just you as our customers, but your end users as well. So with that, I thank you for your time. Please enjoy the rest of the week, and we love your feedback. Please make sure you fill out the feedback forms. Thanks, folks.